Yo, Pokey26 here, and we have the final patch notes, which are the now live patch note for Warcraft 3. And it looks like they did change a few things from the previous version, which they said they might, still be doing, of course. That's why they had the previous version of it. And yeah, we're just going to quickly go over it, try to pick out what changed. I do know a few things, but others, it's possible I might miss some without looking back through the entire previous one. Anyways, we'll just look over these changes for what they are and what it means to the game. And, just go from there. So, we have patch 1.36.2. And starting with human, we have the one change that is honestly, I feel like it's talked about a lot and mentioned a lot about how kind of crazy it is that you can target heroes with polymorph. And I do think it's a very weird change to have. But at the same time, I honestly think this change is going to have so little impact in the game because people they aren't going to go polymorph simply to get a 1.5 second duration poly on heroes. This just not going to happen. Now, that being said, of course, at lower MMRs where more things are possible, you can do more things because everything can sort of win. You might see this more. It might have some sort of impact. But at high level, I really only can see this being used like very, very late game against, I mean, I don't know. I guess it could be used against like the other three races besides human for sure. But it would be, like I said, very, very late game. Like the human would probably have 3 bases versus 2 bases at this point and wants to add something extra, and they add some sorks and they finally get poly after they've already got inner fire and whatever other 3/3 upgrades and stuff. It's like, it's whatever at that point, right? So I do think this is a change that doesn't mean much, but it is interesting to see, and it will definitely trigger some people when they actually get hit by it in lower MMR games. But overall, balance wise, I don't think this matters much. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it more. I just don't see it happening. Arcane Tower hero feedback reduced. I think that's good. It used to be lower than this to begin with. I think it was like 12 or 8 or something. So this is still like overall a buff from then, but it's less of a buff than it was in the previous patch. Knights and Sundering Blade no longer require a lumber mill, which is actually pretty huge. It means lumber mill is not required for much of anything besides like guard towers. Is it even required for a blacksmith? I don't remember. It might be. But yeah, without knights requiring it, you can skip lumber mill in a lot of builds, I would say, unless like I said, workshop requires it. But I think workshop might only require blacksmith. I don't remember. But Sundering Blades do require an upgrade again, and the upgrade is increased from 100 to 100 150. I do think it's weird that they're not only changing it so Sundering Blades requires an upgrade again, but increasing the original cost of it too. That seems weird. Like, if they think Sundering Blades needs an increased cost and a cost to begin with, why did they ever get rid of the cost then? Why wasn't this still there? So personally, I think this part of the change is bad. They should have just reverted it back to Sundering Blades requiring a research again and see how it goes. But That being said, it is only a wood cost, so gold wise, it's fine. And hopefully the human has the wood for it, I guess. Flame Strike channel time reduced. I don't really like seeing Blood Mage buffs, but if they are going to do one, I think this is okay. Because the channel time is quite annoying if it gets cancelled. But at the same time, it was kind of cool to be able to cancel such a high damage spell. So I don't know. It's all right. I don't see it changing much in the game, but it matters for those who use Blood Mage. I mean, Blood Mage is a lot more used in like team games, and I guess as far as solo goes, it gets used versus Alpha a bit as a second hero. So there it could matter, especially if the Alpha is playing Keeper first. We'll see. Control magic, mana per summoned hit point. So now I believe this means it requires less mana to steal stuff, which is also, is this the base? Is this like a base mana cost, or is this like a gold cost? I actually don't know what this is referring to. I assume it's a base mana cost. I don't actually remember if there was a base mana cost. Anyways, I think this is all right, but I don't, like I said, it probably doesn't change much. Same with some of the other changes. Dragonhawk Rider base damage increased. Also doesn't change much, but there's potential against Elf that this would be used, which is annoying if you're an Elf player. But what can you do? On a positive note, when it comes to air units getting buffs, they did get rid of the Wyvern less XP buff. So Elf doesn't have to worry about that one, at least, because that one also affected Undead a bit and maybe Human to a minor extent, especially at lower MMRs it would, but in general you don't see Wyvern too much against Human unless it's like Zhao Kai or Lin Go Guagua or something, maybe. Anyways, orc changes. So this is a change people have been kind of talking about for like over a year or 2 years or however long it's been at this point, where rather than just nerfing or buffing headhunters as a whole, like they have been, and just making either headhunters too strong or too weak when they do so, they could instead make it so headhunters are slightly weaker early game, but still strong late game when they're berserker form, because orcs do need a fairly strong late game anti-air unit without relying on bats, because bats cannot always cover tier 3 air well enough if they have lots of armor, right? So orc kind of needs this combined with Blade Master Lightning Orb or whatever the case may be. So I do think this is a cool change, but it feels like the type of change they should have done, like I said, like a year or 2 ago. It is very late, but yeah. As for right now, I don't even know if this change is necessarily needed right now either. Or if this change, I don't know, maybe this opens up different things. Like maybe they actually have Berserker damage increased to 23 or something, and Troll Headhunter stays at 22 if that works. I don't know. We'll see if it changes anything in the future, but right now, it's probably okay. I don't think, I don't know. Are headhunters as oppressive as they used to be? Because I haven't really heard them being as oppressive as they used to be. I'm sure they're still strong. Like, I would still play them quite often, but I think people have largely started to do better against them anyways, so I don't really know if this was needed. Going on to the other changes, heal wards, reduced cost. It's good, but it's irrelevant. Like, this isn't going to particularly change anything. I guess if you manage to actually fit in 1 to 2 doctors with heal wards in like late game against a human, this could matter. Maybe you're able to actually plant 2 heal wards instead of 1 with your Witch Doctor. 300 mana instead of 200 mana. So rather than like a heal ward plus a stasis trap, you can have 2 heal wards at 300 mana. Kind of relevant, but very rare. Usually Orc vs Human is over before that point. But every now and then there are games where it goes 2 base versus 2 base. They're fighting for heal scrolls. Orc eventually adds 1 to 2 Witch Doctors with heal wards so that after a fight they can TP out, drop a heal ward, actually get healed up properly, and fight again. But like I said, it's very rare. I've seen it, it's just very, very rare. Tauren move speed increased. It's cool. I mean, it'll help Tauren, but at the same time, Tauren's just in this awkward spot where they are very strong anti-ground, but you get them at a point where your opponents might be getting very strong anti-ground units that are air units, so they just directly counter Tauren. You got Chimeras for Elf, Frostworms for Undead, and Griffins for Human. And then, the Tauren for Orc is just... It just doesn't work well. They were originally thinking of Tier 2 Tauren, but instead nerfing some things about Tauren so it could fit at Tier 2. And I think that would have been quite interesting. I don't know if it would have been good. Design-wise, it's kind of weird as well to not have a Tier 3 unit for Orc. But it would have been interesting at least. But this is their way of like somehow making them stronger, but still irrelevant in solo generally. In team play, I guess it is probably good. Serpent Ward, level 3 base damage reduced. I think this is a very minor change. And it mostly is used in like the Orc versus Elf matchup, if at all. And even then, sometimes I think they generally would go level 3 Serpents, but there are some times where I think they actually go level 3 Heal Wave instead of level 3 Serpents to begin with. I don't really know how much this matters. Maybe if they weren't already, they would go Heal Wave now on level 5. But this is still lots of damage, so if you like Serpent Wars before, they're still strong. They just, are slightly less strong, I guess. I guess it adds up if you end up getting like 5 Serpent Wards and they're each doing 2 less damage, but they're still going to be useful for what they do. And then we still have a lot of these changes. I believe this change, movement speed buff, is on Demolishers for Orc, Glaive Throwers for Elf, and Meat Wagons for Undead. It's a very interesting change. I don't really know what the goal is with it or why this change is happening. Like, are they expecting Tier 2 siege unit pushes more because of this? Siege units are just kind of in this weird place where they currently, if used at all, are generally used to take out casters or defend against tower bushes rather than break towers of the opponent. So, and one of the races that commonly would have towers and an expansion that you would want to break is Human, who doesn't even have fortified towers. They got heavy armor towers. So you're like, this is kind of awkward as a unit. But I think siege units have always been in this awkward place within Warcraft where they just didn't fit the role that they were made for, which is an actual siege unit. Instead, they're like an anti-caster unit or an anti-unarmored unit. You'd get them versus hunts or mass casters. Maybe it's Sork's priests or Talons or whatever. But I don't know. Sometimes you'll see them rarely versus buildings, but it's generally in a tower push from both sides getting them. And I don't know. I don't know if the movement speed matters much there, but okay. It'll help, I guess, for making them stronger. But were they needed to be stronger in those situations either? I don't know. Because this would mostly help the offensive player in the tower push, whereas the defensive player doesn't care about the move speed, right? In which case, I think that's actually a bad change then. But if it does help for seeing more tier 2 pushes, I think that would be cool. I just realistically don't see it happening. This change, like I said, for offensive tower push, it is relevant, and Searing Arrows is buffed, which means Elfmere, you are going to see more Priestess with more Hunt Glaive Thrower pushes. And I don't like that, but it is Elfmere, and generally you don't balance around mirror matchups, but at the same time, these changes are generally only going to be used in Elfmere. Maybe you'll see glaive throwers rarely against human as well, with like a push against human with Hunt's glaives, but generally it's Elfmere that you see this, right? And in that sense, I don't like it, but yeah, the Searing Arrow change. They did get rid of the reduced mana cost, but kept the increased damage. And the damage is very relevant now at high levels, because the old damage is 10, 20, 30, and now it's 12, 24, and then 48. So max level Searing Arrow is insane. And in Elfmere, I have fought against plenty of elves that get a level 5 priestess, and if they have 18 more damage per hit, that is insane. That is, literally 3 claws of attack on the old buffed claws of attack patch. So it's kind of crazy to think about in that sense, but it does come at a cost if they're choosing this over True Shot. But I do think this is relevant, because the amount of damage from this and the Priestess is crazy good compared to True Shot, where you need your hunts or whatever to run in before they're even damaging. Now the Priestess can just poke around herself and get tons of damage in, and it's quite scary for that. Starfall changes. They're cool. It is cool. It's reduced duration but increased damage. Starfall did last way too long, and you just kind of sat there being like, okay, it's either going to get canceled right away or it's not. So let's speed up the process, I guess. Another change that is annoying in Elfmere, potentially, but at the same time is probably pretty rare. A lot of the Elfmere pushes wouldn't even have tier 2 to begin with, so maybe this doesn't matter much. And then we got the Moonwell changes. So this is a change I had mentioned in the previous actual patch, or maybe 2 patches ago or something. Not even the different versions of this PTR whatever, but like actual patches ago. I was like, rather than changing the base Moonwell, why not just nerf Wellspring? And they are finally doing it. So they're reverting the base Moonwell change. Or actually, I don't even know if this is reverting it, or if it's just doing it. I don't remember what the old numbers were. But yeah, it was nerfed. Now it's getting buffed again, so I assume it's similar to what it was before. And instead they're nerfing Wellspring. And I think that's good. Yeah. Not much more to say now. I think it's good. I think Wellspring is fine to get nerfed a bit. But it is cool that the base Moonwells are buffed back to what they were before, or similar to what they were before, or whatever. Fan of Knives change. Interesting to see kind of have the same targets on all levels. Does make it easier to understand, rather than having to think, oh wait, I can hit one more target here or whatever. Now you know it's always going to hit 6 targets. But the damage, it actually does less damage on level 1, so it's even more worthless than it was before, and it was already generally bad on level 1. usually you went Shadow Strike first, and you only used Shadow Strike until you were level 3 Warden, and then you went Fan of Knives. But now that Fan of Knives is actually stronger. It's at 130. So, I mean, slight buff to a level 2 Fan, and probably slight buff to level 3 Fan. It's slightly worse against mass, like Gargs, I guess. But I think generally, if you have level 5 Warden and level 3 Panda against Gargs, you have enough damage anyways, probably, that one less target is not meaningful compared to having more damage, whatever, anyways. I think this is a fine change. Warden is still a lesser played hero to begin with for Elf, though, so who knows if it really matters that much. And this one's a big change. It is only 5 health, and I don't know if that makes it escape any sort of level 2 spell AoEs. Maybe it escapes cluster rockets or something from Tinker. I'm not sure. But no one particularly uses cluster rockets from Tinker for that anyways. They would use Panda, Dreadlord, TC, Clap from Mountain King, I guess. And I don't remember the exact numbers on each and every one of those, but I think they still would do 125. Unless, I don't think Clap is only 120, is it? So I think they all do this much, but I'm not positive. I don't actually remember what Clap is at. Maybe Clap was already lower than 120 to begin with, to be honest. Either way, I think this is a good change where sometimes the Wisp is still going to die in the same amount of hits as it did before, but now, every now and then, against, you know, the melee or ranged units or whatever poking at it, it might survive one more hit. It's cool. And it maybe helps a little bit against Chain Lightning in particular from Orc. That's probably the big one, I guess. But it is cool to see Wisp finally getting some health, because we've seen other races have their workers buffed. You know, Acolytes got like more regen on Blight, I believe. Maybe they even got more health at some point. Humans, peasants have got more health multiple times. Peons, I'm not sure if Peons got anything in particular, but they did, of course, get reinforced on tier 2, which helps them defend themselves when they're able to go into reinforced burrows on tier 2 rather than non-reinforced burrows that just die. So, yeah, it is cool to see Elf get something, especially because Wisps are the main AoE dispel that Elf has, and it is pretty relevant that Elf needs to bring these into fight sometimes to detonate stuff. Okay, then yeah, the glaive thrower change, which we kind of already talked about. Annoying for Elfmere, but yeah, what can you do? Okay, Undead changes. Anti-magic shell no longer dispellable by devour magic. Wait, was this in the previous PTR changes? I don't even remember this being mentioned, but that is quite interesting. So they're still keeping anti-magic shell like dispellable by other dispels, but not by devour magic. I mean, I guess it's cool. Maybe it helps in Undead Mirror, and I think that's what their goal was with it. But they do have Wand of Negation now too, so if they really wanted, the person playing Destroyers could get one Wand of Negation and use that instead to dispel anti-magic shell, I assume. In which case, this change maybe doesn't even matter that much. It does matter a little bit, but you might still see lots of Destroyers in Undead Mirror at some point. Onto Goldmine build time reduced. Very small change. It's fine. Not much to talk about with it. I guess Undead's probably wanted more ability to expand, and this slightly gives it with 5 seconds quicker. That being said, I don't really like Undeads being able to expand easily, but it's not like that big of a change, so it shouldn't matter much. This one's cool change. I always thought it was quite annoying that Nerubians did normal damage, and then things like archers would just die to Nerubians. And so that was what I was just talking about with Undead expansions being quite annoying when they actually are able to get them. Nerubian towers are one part of that. And archers just kind of got slapped around, right? If an archer gets hit by a Nerubian, it's kind of just dead because it's taking extra damage and it's slowed. And their units are probably ghouls and skellies, which do extra damage, and the archer just dies. So switching this to piercing does help for when you have ranged units early and you're trying to pressure something like an Undead Expo. But the piercing is also cool for Undead because later on, one of the annoying things is air units. And having piercing rather than normal damage against air units is very relevant. So now, while things like archers are a little bit better versus the Nerubians early, things like Wyvern and mass fairy dragons or whatever, hippo riders, I guess, I don't know, probably not hippo riders, but fairy dragons, these are now slightly weaker because the piercing damage will be quite relevant there. And it does mean the Undead can get by with Nerubians and not actually needing spirit towers right away against that, because they have a slow and piercing damage. That'll add up to a lot of extra damage against flying units, and I think that's pretty relevant and probably a good change overall, because you're still going to have the slow effect against things like archers, and ghouls and skellies can still clean them up. It just won't, have that extra damage. So I think this is actually good for Undead. I'd say I like it. I like the change. And then we got some cool frenzy changes. So research time increased, movement speed reduced. I guess people still wanted more frenzy nerfs, and I think this is fine. Like movement speed and research time could end up not affecting the damage in some situations anyways. So Ghoul Frenzy is still going to be strong. It's just not going to hit as quickly, right? Like the ghouls in general are slower and the research time takes longer. So maybe their timing is a few seconds later, and that could matter, but yeah. Ghoul Frenzy in general will still be strong. The ghouls still hit hard or whatever and hit fast. So yeah. Curse duration reduced. Probably good. Same as how I think slow got reduced at some point as well. Maybe it didn't. I don't remember. But some of these skills, they just had such a long duration, and you're sitting there like, why is this on me half an hour later? Like we haven't fought for 10 minutes. Why is this skill on? But yeah, I think this is good. It still lasts quite a long duration. A full minute is plenty. That's generally a fight length. Cripple can now target mechanical. I'm unlikely to see much play, but it could be relevant against tanks situationally. Scroll of Healing removed. This one is very relevant. Now Undead, like the other races, has to compete for the Scroll of Healing at the shops, which I think is a good change and probably should have been in the game to begin with. But if you're an Undead player, you're probably sitting there like, that kind of sucks. I want my scrolls, bro. give them back. So it will be interesting for Undead players getting used to this. But I think it's a good change that should have been introduced before. And it comes with a different item in the shop, which is one of Negation. New item, technically old item, but newly brought back to the game. And this is basically a dispel wand thing, which is really cool for Undead, because it means Undead can now get dispel at tier 2 without needing to rush tier 3 and destroyers. And I think this is good for the game. That being said, I do wonder if there's going to be some like strong pushes with like Undead being able to buy one negation rate at tier 2 and then doing like a tier 2 push. Now, other races that maybe wanted to defend with things like water elementals as human or whatever, if you get 2 water elementals dispelled from this, they're going to die quite quickly, and the undead's going to continue their push, and you might just lose your towers. And maybe this is, it could be quite strong. But we'll see if those sort of pushes become relevant or not. They'll definitely be relevant at lower levels of play for sure, where people are not necessarily as experienced at defending those sort of pushes and so on. High levels of play, we'll see if they continue to just go tier 3 like normal, or if they try more of this with like Fiend Wagon pushes, which had very rarely seen some play, but had seen some play, and now they can actually add this, which could be relevant. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a good change though, but we'll see what it's like balance wise once the game plays out. And yeah, the meat wagon change. Okay. Could be good if you're doing those tier 2 bushes, I guess, right? Frost Nova slow duration reduced. Frost Nova is still really strong. They haven't nerfed its damage or damage cap or anything like that. It's just some slow duration. So you're still going to take Nova and you're still going to be happy about it because it's still one of the best AoE skills in the game. And yeah, not much to say about it. It's still same slow duration on heroes apparently as well. Just units are a little bit less on higher levels, but still long enough that, yeah, you're okay with this as Undead, I would say. Like if you're going to get a Nova change, this is probably the Nova change you'd be most accepting of as Undead. So yeah. Crypt Lord Impale reduced cost. Pretty relevant. 10 mana is quite a lot. And we could see more Undead play with Crypt Lord again. I already would play Crypt Lord myself, so yeah. That being said, it is used very rarely at high levels of play, so I think this is a welcome change, but at the same time, at lower levels of play, I do think Crypt Lord is very oppressive at lower levels of play because he's fairly easy and strong for what he does at lower MMR. So we'll see how it goes. But at high MMR, this is probably good. And that's currently how the game generally gets balanced. So I guess you would say it's a good change. As someone who, when I play Undead, I play Crypt Lord, I guess this is good for me as well. So I'll take it. Death and Decay, mana cost reduced. Sure. I guess it's good, but, largely irrelevant. Like some of these changes technically are as ultimates. Yeah. Web upgrade cost reduced. This one's very relevant, and I think it's a good change. It would have been nice if this sort of change had happened a long time ago if they were going to do it, but it's still relevant, it's still good. And that extra 50/50 resources is, it can be significant because Undead does have very tight costs on everything on their way to like tier 3 and whatever generally. So, with the extra 50/50, maybe that allows you to fit in Burrow that you might not have wanted to get before because Burrow's 75/75 and, somewhat translate over, I guess. Boneyard cost reduced. Small gold cost reduction, basically okay. Frostworm freezing breath, lumber cost reduced, okay. They're basically just trying to make worms, more usable. Sadly, this just makes it even easier to do it against something like Elf, which is already done against with like Garg Worm. Uh, but maybe it means they would see play against Orc as well in some very niche scenarios. I don't know. As an elf, annoying. Same with like the Dragonhawk change, annoying. But I think they are less annoying than what the proposed Wyvern change was going to be, and the Wyvern change got cut. So as elf, whatever, you'll deal with it. As undead, unless you're already a worm player, you probably don't care anyway. So it's whatever generally. But yeah, it will be cool, I guess, in the sense that maybe we see more worms, which are a very low played unit. Abomination base damage increased. This one's pretty cool. Abominations generally were just thought of as fat tanks, basically. Just walking around spreading disease cloud and soaking up some coils to stay alive longer. But, you know, with a little bit of damage, it's relevant. So I think it's a good change, especially with how little abominations see play in general. But there are some situations where you get a bunch of abominations out and they do feel pretty strong and oppressive from the other side. So we'll see how it goes. And then, yeah, these changes I think are all the same as the previous version and they're generally all good. Like I think they had increased volcano damage against billions and now they're like reducing it again or something. Soul burn, damage reduction. This is kind of huge. 75% is a lot. And increased duration. Tornado speed. I don't think it's necessarily needed, but okay, that's fine. I already used tornado. Mana shield cost is reduced, and I think that's good. But you still probably won't see mana shield very often. At least not leveled up. Maybe you'll get 1 point just to keep your hero alive. This change from a design perspective, I think, is horrible. It's one thing to change the food cost of something from one food cost to another, but to add a food cost to a unit that never, or that just didn't have a food cost at all, design perspective wise, in a 20-year-old game, that is horrible. But one food is probably manageable. It's just definitely going to trigger some people because there's definitely going to be people that run to the lab to buy a Zeppelin quick and they're sitting at like 50 out of 50 food or something. And they realize, wait, I can't actually buy a Zeppelin. And then their army just is getting creep jacked by their opponent. And they're like, oh, why can't I buy this? Why? I have the resources. And then they finally lose a unit and they're able to buy it because they have the food. And they're like, oh my God, this has a food cost. No, I cannot believe it. And then they're, just triggered. So I think this is bad design wise, but who knows? Maybe balance wise, it's fine, I guess. As an elf, it's most manageable because wisps can always be detonated easily. Lol. But yeah. And then yeah, it's just items and creeps after. So Onk buff, good. Gloves of Haste, small buff, probably also good. Circlet, increased cost. Interesting. I do wonder, like, this affects the sell price as well, probably, but I don't think you would sell it just because of this. It's like very small. So this most affects Orc, but circlets were bought in general from other races too. Like Demon Hunters buy them. Even Happy with his Death Knight would buy them and then potentially pass it to the Lich later. So it's probably a good change, but it does probably affect Orc disproportionately to other races. I even saw humans buy this before with like their Archmage because it's just humans have a lot of gold to spend early and being able to buy boots and circlet helps them stay alive until their economy really picks up. So it's good, but like I said, probably disproportionately affects orc. So hopefully that's not a problem, but we'll see. Or I should say it mostly affects Blade Master orc. It doesn't actually affect other orc play, but Blade Master is the most relevant at high levels, so yeah. Creep changes, I don't think I really care to talk much about these. I think they're generally good, and I've talked about them in the previous versions as well. But yeah, you can see them here if you want. Bug fixes, tournament. Plus Tidehunters is cool. This is bad. why are they getting rid of Shattered Exile for things like synergy? And then the other changes I don't really know. Anyways, that's pretty much the patch. Yeah. Overall, I think the patch is probably good. I just think it's a very uninteresting patch overall as well. There's not really much changes here that I'm like, wow, I want to do something with that. Like if anything, it would be Undead North Drakkar style, which is like Crypt Lord Fiend's tier 2 push. Because now you have faster Wagons if you toss in a Wagon, which he does. And you have Wand of Negation if you want Dispel, also very relevant against, potentially Farseer Wolves or whatever. Entangle, Treants if you're facing an elf, I guess, or Water Elementals if you're facing a human. All pretty relevant with Wand of Negation. Yeah. And Crypt Lord Impale, reduced cost. So like that sort of playstyle, Crypt Lord tier 2 push. Probably the most interesting to me. But yeah, everything else is generally small changes. Searing Arrow change is annoying for Elfmere, combined with like Glaive Thrower and so on. But otherwise, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. That's all I have to say about it. It's fine. Yep. That's my thoughts. GG. Yeah, hopefully the people that are still playing Warcraft a lot are going to enjoy these. If not, continue to voice their opinion on what they would like to see changed if there are future changes, I guess. But overall, like I said, I think these are fine changes, but they're also largely uninteresting to me. I think Warcraft would be much cooler if there were more patches and they really changed some parts of the game. See you next year for our next patch. And GG noobs. That's probably gonna be all for this stream discussion. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And hopefully you like the patch if you're a Warcraft player.